Look at my ugly sweater. It seemed appropriate. Hello everyone, my name is Gaby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm gonna be doing my December wrap up, hence the ugly Christmas sweater. This pom-pom is actually really annoying to have, but... So, it's a bit late into January by now, but I really wanted to do a December wrap up before I could do all the books I read in 2020, and that's going to be a really fun video. So I'm looking forward to that and it's gonna be fun. But today it's December wrap up. So I have read 8 books in December, which I think is my maximum in 2020 of books I read in 1 month. And most of them were really good. The first book that I read was the Adventure Zone graphic novel volume 1 called Here There Be Gerblins. And this was so much fun. This is a graphic novel of a podcast that I've listened to before and I really enjoy, by the McElroys, called The Adventure Zone. In this podcast, a father and 3 sons play D&D, where one of the sons is the dungeon master, so he comes up with the story, and the other 3 are the characters in the story, and they kind of have to go through an adventure. In this case, there is a elf mage, a human fighter, and a dwarf cleric. And the podcast is simply amazing. It's so funny, and I really wanted to read. It's so funny, but it's also so emotional at points. So I really wanted to read the graphic novelization of it, and I think it was really well done. The drawings are stunning. I really like the style of it, but what I especially enjoyed was the way that a podcast about D&D was put into a graphic novel. I thought that was really smart and worked really well. So I give this 4 stars because it's never gonna be quite as good as the podcast, but I really enjoyed it anyway. Then the second book that I read, I don't own because I listened to it on audiobook, and this is All That Glitter, or Enchanté, I think it's called as well. I think it might be French, but I'm not sure at all. This is the story of a girl that lives in France during Marie Antoinette's reign, and there is magic in this world. There is the magie ordinaire, which is like changing objects into other objects. L'Igla, which is disguising yourself, changing your own appearance. And then there is the third type of magic, which I don't remember the French name for it, but it's basically giving a certain object a power. In the beginning of the book, she only knows la magie ordinaire. She only knows how to turn really simple objects, and she uses this to help her family. She and her siblings are orphans, and her sister is really sick, and her brother, who is supposed to take care of them, is always gambling away all their money and really getting into trouble. So she has to make sure that they have enough money to survive. One day she meets a boy in a balloon, and from there it sparks a romance, but also she realizes that she needs more money, so she decides to go to Versailles and gamble by using magic for turning cards. And this is a book all about political intrigue, about magic, and about romance. Unfortunately, while the concept of it sounds really appealing, I didn't really like this book. I only gave it 2.5 stars because it really wasn't very captivating. It felt very much like random things were happening and didn't have a thread to connect them all, and I didn't enjoy the writing that much, so it had some issues, but I definitely see the potential in this book. It definitely had great ideas, and while the execution maybe wasn't the best, I still enjoyed it, and I'm still planning to read the second one, which is coming out in 2021, I think. So that was All That Glitters. Then the third book I read was China Rich Girlfriend. This is the sequel to Crazy Rich Asians. Crazy Rich Asians is one of my favorite books of 2020, which you can check out in my video about my top 10 of 2020. And so I really wanted to read the sequel. This book is set a couple of years after the end of Crazy Rich Asians, and Rachel is about to get married, but she really wants to know who her father is, wants to meet him, but she hasn't been able to. So she finally meets him, and she discovered he's actually a really important and rich man in mainland China, and she tries to build a relationship with him, his wife, and her half-brother, and there's a lot of drama between, like, especially to do with her half-brother and to do with Astrid, Nick's cousin. So it's not quite as focused on Rachel as the previous one was on Rachel or on Nick, and I thought that was a bit of a mistake. The other thing that I thought didn't really work that much was how this book lost the funny aspect of Crazy Rich Asians, which is what works the most for me, was how funny Crazy Rich Asians was, while China Rich Girlfriend was a lot more about the drama, the spectacle, the how crazy can we make it. It felt a lot more like a reality TV show rather than a telenovela that doesn't take itself very seriously, while I really enjoyed that aspect of the first one. So I only gave this one 3 stars, but I'm looking forward to reading the third one, which is called Rich People Problems, and hopefully I'll get to it in 2021. Then, as we were drawing closer to Christmas and my holiday from work started, I read In a Holiday by Christina Lauren. In a Holidays is a 2020 release which has been going around a lot on BookTube because it's really nice. This is the story of May, and she always spends Christmas with her family and her family's friends in a cabin in the mountains, and she's in love with Andrew, who is the son of her mom's and dad's friends. But this year she, while drunk, she makes out with Miles, Andrew's brother, and at the end of the holiday the owner of the cabin tell them that they're going to sell because they can't afford to keep the house. So on her way back to the airport, she makes a wish to the universe to show her what will make her happy, and she gets into a car accident and she wakes up on the plane to the cabin. So she wakes up before Christmas and she gets a chance to relive the Christmas holiday she just had. She has to figure out how to get out of this time loop and why she's stuck here and how she can get back, pretty much. This is definitely a romance book, but it has a sort of sci-fi element to it with this time travel, time loop thing, and I thought the romance was really cute. Andrew is really sweet and I like him a lot. May is a bit bland, but I didn't mind, it was fine. And my only complaint was that it really could have used more focus on this time loop, because after the first 100 pages she's in her final time loop, and I thought it could have been explored even more, and I thought I would have really benefited from that, but it was still really good, so I gave it 4 stars, and I recommend it to anyone who wants to read it on the next Christmas, because it's really fun. Then I read The Black Flamingo. This book was just fantastic, and it's another one of my top 10 of 2020. So this book is about Michael, and Michael is half black, half Greek Cypriot, and he grows up in the UK, and he has to come to terms with his identity, with not being black enough, but not being Greek enough, and being discriminated against for both his heritage in the UK society he lives in. And he also, as he grows up, he also starts to realize that he's gay, and he has to come to terms with his diversity in that as well, and how society tells him that his identity is not right. And when he gets to college, he decides that he wants to be a drag performer, and his drag name is Black Flamingo. And it's just a book about discovery of yourself. It's about a book of coming into your own. It goes from childhood up until college, university days, and it is just so fantastic. It's so meaningful. It is so well written. There are so many exploration of race, of identity, of gender, of sexuality that I really, really appreciate it, and I think are really important to have. And not to talk about how beautiful it was written. It was written all in verse, and it had illustrations, and it just was so good. And I recommend this to everyone, especially to people who live in the UK, especially maybe young adults and who want to know more about someone in the LGBTQ community or someone of a non-white background, because I think this is such a good representation of both of those things. And it's really near and dear to my heart. Then I wanted a bit of a break from all these emotions, from romance to love, emotion in the Black Flamingo. So I went with a horror graphic novel. This is Through the Woods by Emily Carroll, and it is stunning. It's not only beautiful, but it is absolutely creepy, terrifying. It is also one of my favorite books of 2020 because this is the scariest thing I've ever read. And this year I've also read like proper horror books that are not graphic novels, but they didn't scare me as much as this did. This is all about, like the blurb says, it's about chilling stories. The blurb says it's about chilling stories which follow journeys into and out of the eerie abyss. But basically it's like 4-5 graphic novels about it's like 6 short stories about creatures and ghosts and how no one is safe really, and the world is a really scary place. Fantastic. I'm definitely gonna check out more of Emily Carroll because wow, this was amazing. So good. And then on Christmas Day, I started the 12 Dates with Christmas, another holiday romance. This is by Jenny Bayliss, and it's about Kate, who is in her late 30s and she's single, but she's happily single. Her friends though convince her to sign up to a dating service called the 12 Dates of Christmas. So in the 12 days, in the days leading up to Christmas, she gets paired up with a guy, and she goes on a really holiday, Christmassy date with this guy, and like with 12 different guys. So a lot of the guys she meets are really awful, and I was thinking like, oh, that's so unrealistic. But then I thought better about who was on Tinder when I was on Tinder, and I'm like, you know what, it's not that unrealistic. So I'm not complaining about that anymore. And another 2 really important characters are her 2 friends, and one of which she has a difficult relationship with, like a complicated past with him. And it's really sweet, not that trope heavy actually, and I really enjoyed reading this. It felt super Christmassy. There were so many Christmas holiday traditions, like there was a gingerbread house competition, there was a so good. I really like this book, and it is 4 stars definitely. Even though it was a bit long, that's my only complaint about this book. It was a bit long because it didn't need to be 450 pages long, really. So at some point we knew where it was gonna go, but it just wasn't going there yet, and it kind of dragged on a little bit too long. And then the last book that I read in 2020 was The Late Bloomers Club. Bit of a sour note to end the year in, unfortunately. This is a romance about a woman in her 40s who runs a diner in a small town, and one day when her neighbor dies, she gets left with a big house and that she doesn't really know what to do. Her and her sister have to deal with this house because they can't afford to keep it, but they don't want to sell it to a big corporation that could ruin the town. So there is this discrepancy between what they want and what they can do, and she kind of falls in love with the man from the city who come from a big company that's trying to buy the land. Unfortunately, it wasn't good. It was very boring. It was not pleasant to read. It was very stereotypical. The only thing that I kind of liked was this representation of a small town. It felt really realistic. And no, there is another thing that I really enjoyed, which was the description of cakes. So at some point the characters bake, and oh my god, I want to have the maple burnt sugar cake because that sounds fantastic. But beside that, the love interest was super bland. She was super bland. She kept making problems where there were no problems, and it just frustrated me. The only reason I didn't drop it was because I wanted to have 32 books read in the year 2020, so that I could have, I read 30 books in 6 months, and I really wanted to hit that target. But otherwise I would not have finished it because it was just not for me. I give it 1.8 stars. Just because I don't want to be too mean, but it could have been a 1.5 star, really. And unfortunately that was the last book I read in 2020, but hopefully 2021 will start with a good book. So that was it for me. That was my December wrap up for 2020, and subscribe, check out my other videos, especially my top 10 books of 2020, and thank you for watching. My name is Livia. This was fun. Let's do it again.